Welcome to Mysteries, Monsters, and Mayhem.
I'm Shannon Lawrence.
And I'm MB Partlow.
Quick content warning before we get started. This podcast may contain language and disturbing content, so enter at your own risk. Hi there.
Hello.
How's it going?
Good.
Good.
I did something new.
What?
I watched Svengoolie.
I've been wanting to watch that. I just haven't bothered. All I have to do is be like, hey, husband, how do you get this for me? Was it MeTV?
Yes.
Yes. For the longest time, I didn't know where Suzanne was watching Svengoolie.
And it is on, I know you don't have cable, but I can get it on cable. Because she's like, I don't know how the hell y'all get it, but you should be watching Svengoolie on MeTV. So I did. And it was Curse of the Werewolf.
Yeah.
Which was a British film set in... Was it set in Spain or Italy? I think it was set in Spain, which is hilarious because it's all these people with very British accents, but then someone would be named Pepe.
I feel like,
And
I feel like I watched that on a Joe Bob thing and that got called into question, but it might have been something different.
And then they would be wearing a ruffled shirt. Was their nod to being Spanish.
That's like Elvira made a second movie and it was set in Transylvania or whatever. Because like, this is not Transylvania. Those are not.
No. But it was a very, it's actually kind of an intense movie. It's really kind of brutal.
Nice.
I was expecting, because a lot of the old movies, the old horror movies especially, I don't find them particularly scary.
Yeah.
And they're kind of cheesy. This one was just, there's so much cruelty between people.
Yeah.
And
it's like a Stephen King book where you're like,
yes,
I can't handle the bullying for a minute.
Yes. It's the monsters you can deal with. It's how the people are treating other people.
Yes. That's something.
And I was also like, why is everyone in this movie such a dickhead?
I don't know.
But it was good.
I watched some Shudder movies recently. There were a couple I liked, and now I can't remember what they were at all. So that's gone completely out of my head. But we've been watching, of course, Poker Face, which I think now ended.
And I haven't caught up with yet.
Okay.
I keep meaning to.
I don't know for sure. It just, this last episode we watched seemed very much like a season ender with like a bit of a cliffhanger type thing.
That would be very short. That would be like, what, 6 episodes?
Even a lot of seasons are that short now.
True.
Sad pants. We watched something, what was it called? Triangle of Sadness. And it's got Woody Harrelson super briefly in it. So he's there on the cover all big, right? Super brief. But it's so weird. We both thought we were watching the wrong movie at first, and not in a good Cabin in the Woods kind of way.
Because I really want to make some inappropriate comments about that title, but I won't.
Here's the thing, yeah. They tell you what the Triangle of Sadness is in the beginning, and it's somebody saying, I need you to lighten your triangle of sadness, and it's his brow.
It sounds
it's
like
something like, because it's male models.
About where the third eye is.
Sure. But it has nothing to do with the third eye, yes. Right? But yes, that's where I'm pointing. So that viewing audience can see it. That doesn't exist. And it starts out, I don't know why. There's one fucking character who's a male model who ends up on this ship. But you have this whole 20-minute intro with these characters and this guy and the male model thing. And they keep making a point that male models make less than female models. And are they prepared for that? You know?
I'm sorry, but fucking when?
Right, that's what I'm saying. I'm like, cry about it, little bitches. But everywhere else, the women will be paid less. But right here, they'll make more. And then he and his girlfriend have a fight, and it's about money. So, like, this seems to be a whole thing for them. Okay. And then they're on this cruise, and it doesn't say anything about the money anymore. And then she makes more than him because she's a female model. And they're on this ship, and she smiles at a guy on the deck crew, and the boyfriend the male model is so insecure that he gets all upset about it. He's like, what if I looked over at her, the one serving people, and smiled at her? And she's like, why do you think she's pretty? And he's like, and it becomes this whole thing. She's like, well, do you think the guy I smiled at is attractive? And he says, well, yeah. And she goes, me too. He's hot. He's like, don't say that. It's so weird. And then everybody else on this ship is super rich because it's like a mega yacht.
Okay.
And then bizarre things. There's a whole conversation between Woody Harrelson and a Russian character about like communism and socialism and Marxism, because Woody Harrelson's character is like, no, I'm not a socialist, I'm a Marxist. And in real life, I believe Woody Harrelson calls himself a Marxist. So anyway, it's this, and then they get into an argument. The ship is rocking. There's a major storm. People are freaking out. Everybody gets sick. You never know if it's the oysters, if it's the rocking of the ship, if it's both, but there's an entire huge expanse of the movie dedicated to everybody vomiting and shitting everywhere. At one point, there's people with life vests on against a wall, and there is just liquid shit rolling down the boat toward them. I do not need to see this. What the hell? And he and the Russian are arguing on the intercom, so everybody's panicking. Because they're like, the ship's going down. And Woody Harrelson's the captain. He's all, the ship's not going down. And the Russian's like, I've taken over as captain. And Woody Harrelson's like, no, he hasn't. And then they start reading something by Marx. And then it's just, none of this is a spoiler. It all shows in little pieces in the preview. And it's like 3 different movies.
It sounds like you've just woke up and you're explaining to me a dream you had.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, and I won't give it away if anybody actually wants to watch that movie, but the ending pissed me off.
Anything with a rolling tide of shit coming down the corridor, I'm content to skip.
So gross.
Yeah, I don't know.
Now, I liked the third part in its own way, but it was still bizarre. And that was part 3 is the people on the island.
Well, now, did you see, speaking of Woody Harrelson playing a role very like Woody Harrelson, did you see Die Hard?
No, I saw that was on there, though.
It's cute.
Because it's Kevin Hart, right?
It's Kevin Hart playing Kevin Hart, or playing a version of Kevin Hart.
Yeah.
And he wants to be an action hero. And there's a new one coming. And what killed me was John Travolta is in this.
Oh.
And he's just hilarious. The whole
John
thing.
Travolta. Everybody can hate on him. I love him still.
He is, he's a really fine actor, and he does great in this. I can't say too much with giving something away, but he goes to how to be an action hero school that's being run by a character played by John Travolta. But they've just made a second movie that's like a continuation, and in that, John Cena.
I don't remember. Yeah. I think it's Cena.
That big guy?
Yeah.
Big, muscly guy?
The ice sculpture. Fucking an ice sculpture. Have you seen that Amy Schumer movie with him?
Yes. Okay. I couldn't place the quote, but I was like, yes. Yeah. Anyway. Oh, and he did, what was the series where they dance at the beginning?
Oh, God, yes.
The superhero movie.
Peacemaker.
Peacemaker. I was going to say Captain Obvious. Because he kind of is in that. But anyway, he's going to be in the second one, or is in the second one. I don't know when that's coming out. But it's worth a watch. I found it very entertaining.
Yeah. I think we forgot it. Last night we were trying to remember because there were a few things.
And then when you sit down and you go, I can't remember anything I wanted to watch.
Well, after Triangle of Sadness, I had to angry watch something else to entertain me because I was like, fuck this whole movie. At the end, fuck this whole movie. Why did we watch this? How dare they?
And I rewatched the first episode of Kolchak, the Night Stalker.
Oh, nice.
I love that.
I started watching Scrubs again.
Ooh.
Because, I was like, I need something light and frothy and funny. Usually, I mean, they have dramatic elements in it, of course.
Of course.
But
I love the doctor.
Comfortable and familiar.
What's the doctor's name? The mean one.
Oh,
I love him. John McGinty plays...
McGinley?
It's McGinley or McGinty. I can't remember.
Yeah, I almost had it. I think it starts with a K. But then, and I like it in the first episode, you forget after you've watched all these seasons. So I went back and watched the first one, and you have the main character, and he's like... JD. And he's Turk. Like, wait a second, if this other doctor is the bad guy, who's the good guy? And then they show you, the mean, angry, funny doctor is the one who has his little soft moments. The other guy's just always a dick.
Yeah, he's always mean.
I don't think he ever has a soft moment, but I could be wrong because there's 8 seasons or something. I don't remember how many seasons there are. 6.
And that pairing was so popular that those two characters who played Turk and JD still do ads together.
Oh, yeah, they're good friends. And yeah. First place I saw Turk was, what was it? Clueless.
Clueless, yes.
I really like him.
Donald Faison.
Yes. So, yeah, that's been making me happy when I remember to go watch it.
We're friends. Why doesn't anyone ask us to do ads first? I don't know what we would say.
I know. We're not quite that famous. That's
But aside from that whole, nobody knows who the hell we are.
Aside from that, why aren't people paying us to do ads? I don't know.
Why don't we get sponsorships?
Speaking of not being famous, I have a book coming out. So I'm totally going to pep that right now because I haven't been doing it. So Happy Gula Days 2 is coming out and it's up for pre-order. It comes out on the 17th.
And that
so
will be 2 days after. This airs on the 15th.
There you go. So it's out. You can get it on Barnes & Noble from their website. Possibly in some of the stores, but I'm not holding my breath on that one. And you can get it on Amazon and Scripty and all sorts of places. And it's holiday horror, but not Thanksgiving and Christmas, winter holidays. So it starts on St. Patrick's Day. That's why I'm releasing it on St. Patrick's Day.
Nice.
And then it goes through Halloween.
Very nice.
And somebody's talking to me and they were like, oh, I can't wait to read your Halloween one because it'll be really scary. And I was like, actually, it's kind of sad. Has its moments. So, there we go. Well, should I get started since I have a long one today?
Yes. Go for it.
I geek out a little bit on this one, but I really practice restraint. You don't know how much. You won't know how much. Because I should say, my first degree was in psychology, which is a useless degree, so I switched to business. Which has done me far more good already than the psychology degree.
And I can't remember if I heard about this in my psych classes.
Yes. I'm going to go over that.
Or in my sociology classes.
See, either way, you would have hit it. Because it's Psych 101, basically.
Yeah.
And even if you take sociology, if you were getting a sociology major, you would still take Psych 101 usually.
Probably.
Often.
I don't know. That was a long time ago.
Yeah, but it is. It's exactly why I wanted to cover it. And then I discovered so many things that were kept out of the narrative and so many things that were wrong with it. It's fascinating. So that's why I geeked out. Because this is a case that created an entire psychological theory.
Oh, yes. It was huge.
And it turns out what that was based on was completely false narrative.
Much like Stockholm Syndrome.
Yep. Fascinating. It tells you that, I love psychology, and I know people love to call it not a real science. The thing is, it is a science, but it's just, by the way, any psychology degree is an arts degree, just so people know. My psychology degree is in arts. My business degree, science.
Huh.
Fascinating, huh? Because it's really hard to make actual concrete. That's why the DSM changes all the time.
Yes.
People's brains can't really be nailed down. They could if you're a serial killer is the way to nail it down.
It's hard to nail them to a tree,
big nail.
Though. It's hard, though, because they're
squishy, and they will just fall apart.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I'm going to discuss Kitty Genovese.
It's like, how the hell did we get here? We're nailing brains to a tree. That's okay.
I don't feel that's unusual. That's fine.
No, it's not unusual for us. But it doesn't also... Anyway, go ahead. Kitty Genovese.
Kitty Catty.
Kitty
We'll just call her that for the rest of it. That won't make it less serious at all.
No.
Okay. So she was born Catherine Susan Genovese, but she went by the name Kitty. So that's what I'm going to call her from here on out. She was born July 7th, 1935 in Brooklyn, New York. She lived in a largely Italian and Irish area of New York called Park Slope, and her family was Italian. In 1954, her mother observed a murder in the neighborhood. This isn't foreshadowing at all. And so her family, including her 4 younger siblings, moved to Connecticut. But Kitty had just finished school and she was engaged to be married. So she stayed and she got married. And then in less than a year later, the marriage was annulled because Kitty, it turns out, was a lesbian.
I don't recall hearing that in the narrative.
You know why? Because the original editor for the New York Times who published the story was a homophobe, so he did not put that in there. They referred to her partner as her roommate. So, yeah. There's one factoid that's not in the textbooks. It's not in any of that because it didn't go out initially. But I was like, so less than a year later, so did she marry the guy and she was like, shit, I don't like dick at all. Or did she already kind of know and she was like, I could, that pressure to conform because it wouldn't have been good to be gay. So was she like, that of course isn't anywhere because nobody wanted to dive into that.
Yes. And it might have been that she was trying.
Exactly.
She was trying to meet the standards.
There's a ton of people, men and women, back in the we're talking about the 60s.
But yeah.
When all this goes down. Mm-hmm. And yeah. You think, okay, I have to live this life that's, and we'll put this in quotes, normal, because this is what society says is normal. So I don't know. There's nothing about that. I was just curious. I was like, yep, nope, don't like this at all. Let's annul this shit. Kitty tried a variety of jobs, including office work and being a barmaid, but what she discovered she was good at was bartending. In fact, she was making about $750 per week in 1964, according to a couple articles, which was absolutely unheard of for a woman and really a lot of people.
Uh-huh.
And her dad kept pushing her to get married.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of up in the air whether they really, really knew, but they did know. But they were like, you need to marry, find a good man. And she just kept saying, nobody's going to marry me because I make more than any man right now. They can't handle it. Back in 1961, she had been arrested for bookmaking in a previous bar as she took bets from patrons on horse racing. I still think that's a ridiculous thing to legislate, but okay. Whatever. Mm-hmm. But at Ev's 11th Hour Bar in Queens, she became a manager and she did really well for herself. She was saving money to open her own Italian restaurant someday.
Okay.
By 1964, 28-year-old Kitty was living with her girlfriend, Mary Ann Zalonko, in an apartment in Kew Gardens. On March 13th of that year, around 2:30 or 3 a.m., Kitty got off work at the bar, hopped into her car to drive home. What she didn't know was that she'd been spotted by a predator who was out on the hunt and who had been just about to give up when he saw her walk into the car. Yeah. When she parked at the rail yard adjacent to her apartment, and this part bothers me too, it was 100 feet from there to her apartment. That's the distance.
That's nothing.
Nope. So all this happened in a 100-foot space.
I mean, you can practically spit that far.
Mm-hmm. She parked there, started walking across the parking lot, and 29-year-old Winston Mosley, father of two and a married man who worked creating punch cards for the computers of the day, like we saw in what is it, Hidden Figures or whatever it was.
I'm old. I've seen punch cards.
Cool.
I'm not old enough that I've used them, but I'm married to someone who has.
Groovy. My dad might have.
I
found my playing cards for the Cray computer, and if anybody doesn't know, that was a massive room-size computer.
Yes.
That he brought when he went to like a special conference being, this is the big new thing! And he brought that home to me. Here's playing cards. Okay, so he jumped out of his car, parked out on the street, and ran after Kitty. It appears she heard his footsteps and took off running, but he was faster, and he stabbed her twice in the back with a serrated hunting knife.
Ugh.
She screamed, "Oh my God, he stabbed me. Please help." And she fought him off the best she could. They said that she clearly fought. And from all accounts, this was her personality. She was a fighter. She was vivacious. She was a go-getter. She was managing a bar in the 60s as a woman. So anyway.
Drunks weren't any better behaved back then
God, no.
than they are now.
A man named Robert Moser looked out his window and yelled for Mosley to let that girl alone. And it scared Mosley, and he ran back to his car, allowing Kitty to get up from the ground and stumble around to the apartment's vestibule. Now, the setup here was it was a 2-floor apartment building, and there was another apartment building, and I don't know how tall that one was. But the bottom set, the apartments were only on the second floor.
Mm-hmm.
And on the bottom were shops. There was like a bookstore and stuff like that. And to get to the apartment, you had to walk through this little alley up to the back. But I mean, she didn't even make it to the alley at first, right? She got attacked before she hit the dark alley. And so she gets up and she stumbles back around this building to the back. And there's a locked door. And I don't know, she couldn't get in through a locked door. Probably she couldn't get to her shit and all of that.
Yeah. So or she might have dropped them or...
Yeah. So she collapsed there. And the thing is, this is important in its own way. At this point, she's now on the opposite side of the building where the first thing occurred. Where anybody who heard the sounds and saw anything, now they see the man has run away and she has disappeared as well. So they just assume, okay, she's fine. In the meantime, she's in the back just bleeding in the vestibule. Unfortunately, her lung had been pierced by the knife, so it's thought she likely couldn't even scream anymore.
Ugh.
So there would have been no more screams. Weakened from the lung injury and the blood loss, she just stayed there in the vestibule, and it was probably a passage of about 10 minutes. Mosley drove away, and it's thought he kind of circled around and waited. The police never came, right? So he came back. He parked in a different spot than the first time. He searched the parking lot, the railroad station, and one of the 2 apartment buildings before finding Kitty lying in the vestibule. However much passage time this was. The entire thing took about 30 minutes.
So...
beginning to end.
He didn't just, drive by and look and see if he could see her. He got out of his car and searched
for her to finish what he had started. Jesus. Yep. So he found her, and he stabbed her again multiple times. He viciously raped her, and he stole $49 from her wallet and left her to die. It would later be found she had 13 stab wounds at least and defensive wounds on her hands. A 70-year-old woman who was friends with the couple came out to investigate the sounds, and she found Kitty, struggling to breathe, of course, punctured lung, bleeding all over the place. Sophie Farrar was her name. She sat down on the ground, pulled Kitty into her arms and held her, and tried to comfort her. Carl Ross, a neighbor and friend, phoned the police at about 4 a.m. There's something tricky about him, and we'll get back to him, too. Kitty died in the ambulance. On the way to the hospital, I think 4:15 a.m. is about her time of death. Kitty's death would have been unremarkable at the time. Nobody cared. Nobody cared about rape. Back then, it wasn't a real thing to them. They asked for it.
She was coming home alone in the middle of the night.
Oh, yeah, so I'm going to mention that later, too. Yeah, actual quotes from people. But this got spun by the New York Times about 2 weeks later into something that it wasn't. And this is where we get to that psych stuff, to this psychological theory that's taught in Psych 101 in both high school and college. And so I spent way too long on this story because I was fascinated by it all. Like reading papers and stuff like that on people looking back at it. So to jump into it, I'm going to quote the New York Times article that started this movement, right? Quote, for more than half an hour, 38 respectable law-abiding citizens in Queens watched a killer stalk and stab a woman in 3 separate attacks in Kew Gardens. First of all, there were 2 separate attacks, not 3. And later, quote, not one person telephoned the police during the assault. One witness called after the woman was dead. We've already established that isn't true just from what I've said.
Yeah.
Carl called, and the ambulance got her, and she died in the ambulance. The headline was, erroneously, actually, 37 who saw murder didn't call the police. And then in the article, it said 38. A.M. Rosenthal was the Metropolitan editor at the time, or Abe, as everybody was calling him, and apparently feared by many, some sort of weird, fearful respect. They didn't want to cross him. So I couldn't tell if it was were they afraid that he'd take to the New York Times and put some shit about them in there? I don't know. But whatever it was, nobody would cross him on the facts of this. So this headline stood, this article stood for decades. Mm-hmm. It wouldn't be until 2004 that the New York Times questioned the original article. And in 2007, an American Psychologist article went into how the lack of facts from the original article was called into question. By that time, decades of students, including me,
and me,
had learned about something called the Bystander Effect, also known as the Genovese syndrome or Bad Samaritan. So it had a few names, but we learn about it as the Bystander Effect.
Yes.
And the thing is, I actually found that effect so impactful that whenever I was in a situation, I was like, well, I can't assume that other people are going to call or handle this or step in. And so then, then I wouldn't wait, right? And it was because it was there in the back of my mind. Although, before I learned that, I was already the type that stepped in. But
Yes.
still, I thought about it.
Yes.
Whenever there was a, should I call or should I not call or something like that, I was like, all right, I'll call. Because I can't assume somebody else. So, short and simple terms, this effect indicates that if there's a crowd of people, there's something called diffusion of responsibility, meaning that the more people there are, the less responsibility an individual takes to do something about what's occurring. This is my summary of it. So take it as you want. They assume that someone else knows what to do more than they do, as an example, or say that people not acting know more than they do, or so on and so forth. Whatever the reason, people don't act when they're in a crowd.
I can kind of see where that's coming from, except in this case, I can understand it if there's a crowd on the sidewalk. It was
3 a.m.
And how do you know that how could they demonstrate that these people knew that everybody else was seeing what they were seeing? Which they weren't, but.
Right. And here's the thing. So logically, police later were like, by the time the first attack happened so fast, it was basically this blitz attack. By the time people probably got to their window after being woken up, they might have only seen these two walking separate ways.
True.
So,
or only
if you've seen two people walking or whatever, then you're like, okay. They were also next to a very busy, rowdy bar. So it was known to be loud at that time. So a bunch of people probably didn't even look out the window. There's so many things.
And plus, if you hear something in the middle of the night, you don't wake up and go, that was a woman screaming. Generally speaking, you come awake and you go, what was that?
Yeah.
And then you try to figure out, is it something I need to actually get out of bed and look out the window for?
Right.
Or am I going to step in something? If you have pets. It's
police would also later say there were probably about 6 people who saw any amount of bad happening ultimately. So here's the thing. Updated studies have shown this isn't necessarily even a true effect, that more people often means more people willing to help. There are studies showing it go both ways, such as something that's cited as proof, the Holocaust. Mm-hmm. But that's also a very different long-term political danger to whoever, blah, blah, blah. I think there's a lot more to the Holocaust than the bystander effect.
Yes.
Is my thing. Interestingly, to tie the writing world into this, Harlan Ellison wrote a piece for the magazine of Fantasy and Science Fiction in 1988 about this case, talking about the effect and the urban nightmare and all of this. Nobody wants to live in the city. It's totally apathetic. And how many of us have heard that? How many of us grew up knowing that? Oh, the big city. Nobody will take care of you, especially New York City. That has often been the pinnacle, right? A lot of that actually came from this Kitty Genovese case.
By the way, when I've been in New York City, I mean, don't get me wrong, I don't want to live there, but that's because there are just too many fucking people there. But people weren't any better or worse than they are anywhere else.
No.
And they're much more likely to tell you information. They might yell it at you. But
just go down the street and
my God, it's right down
It's right there on the right. Jesus, you walk right past it. All right. Okay, thank you. I'm just going to a deli. There were some deeply disturbing comments from witnesses as quoted in The Nation, such as, quote, I figured it was a lover's quarrel, that her man had knocked her down, so my wife and I went back to bed. Remember, 60s. Quote, what was she doing out so late anyway? Quote, at one point I thought maybe a girl was being raped, but if she was out alone at that hour, it served her right. So, just going back to what you said earlier. There were more. I figured those 3 made the point.
Yep.
Quotes like these indicated the problem wasn't something called the bystander effect, but the time frame of mentality. In the 1960s, it was widely held that not only did men have the right to slap around their women, but that no one should ever intervene, that was the part that wasn't okay. Societally, no, that's their business.
Yep.
So when they looked out the window and saw a man and a woman tussling, and then they got up and walked apart from each other in some way, right? Mm-hmm. They were like, oh, yep. People leaving the bar, got into a little dust up. They're done now. Yeah, he smacked her good. It's all good. And that was it. And really, it was her fault for being out so late.
Oh, yes. Absolutely. She had no business being out of doors.
She was asking for it.
In the darkness?
Oh, my God. Slut.
Yeah.
Yep. A man was widely quoted as saying, I didn't want to get involved. And I've mentioned his name already. It was also held up as evidence of apathy, right? And in fact, in that original New York Times article, it says, I didn't want to get involved, said Carl Ross sheepishly is the actual line in there.
Oh, they actually put sheepishly.
Sheepishly.
Isn't he the one who called the ambulance?
Ultimately, let's get into some things. Big cities, especially New York, have often pointed to places where neighbors don't take care of neighbors and residents. And because they're scared, they don't want to bring any heat down on them. And this may have been one of the formative cases that led to that idea, like I already said. But when a journalist actually looked into the man who said this, it turned out he was a man living in the building. He was a friend of the couple. He heard the initial crime. Then at least one report says he peered through a crack in his door down at the vestibule and saw the knife go into Kitty during the second.
Ugh.
He debated calling the police after the screams. And he even called a friend to ask whether he should, but the friend said he shouldn't. But it really bothered him, so he called another neighbor, an elderly woman, and she said, "Come to my apartment, I'll call." Why does this matter? He actually had to climb out his window to go to a room because he was afraid to go out into that hallway, right? Because shit was going down. And he went to a room and they did call the police. He was afraid to call because he was a gay man in the 60s.
You know what? I knew when you said he didn't know if he should call or not, and he called a friend who said, "Stay out of it." I started thinking, oh, I bet that's why he didn't want to draw any attention to
That's
himself.
why the lady said, "Come over here. Give me the information.
I'll call."
Yeah. He was afraid of what the police would do to him. And of course, he probably likely feared walking into that hallway and getting stabbed himself.
Yes.
So it wasn't apathy. It was fear.
Yeah.
But he has gone down in history as an
sheepish.
apathetic, sheepish dickbag, right? He was friends with her. He cared about her. He was scared. Yeah. So before anyone says nothing bad would happen to him, let's discuss what Kitty's girlfriend went through after her death. Upon learning Kitty was half of a lesbian couple, they decided Mary Ann must have done it. In fact, in the 60s, people had been led to believe that those in homosexual relationships were more prone to jealousy and violence in the name of jealousy. I'm like, where did that theory come from? Probably one couple had a fight about jealousy and something happened and they went, "Oh, the gays."
Yeah.
I guess. She was grilled, so they questioned her after she went to the body to identify the morgue, and then 2 different detectives came and they grilled her for 6 hours.
Oh my God.
People had reported a man beating a woman. The people who saw that there was a man and a woman in any sort of engagement, not 2 women fighting. So, imagine a gay man in police custody at that time. Because there is a little difference that exists between how, say, a lesbian couple might be treated or a lesbian versus a gay man. There is more often disgust toward a gay man.
Yes.
Because listen, straight men can fantasize still about 2 women, but no, you don't think about 2 men. Like, that's all. So there would have been a difference. He likely would have been beaten. He likely would have gotten even worse treatment than she did. Right?
Probably.
To further dispel the bystander effect, it's documented that there were other phone calls immediately following the initial attack. It took a while, but the police admitted other calls had come in. The problem was that they were viewing something unknown in the dark, different segments of it. One man called in and said a man had knocked a woman down, but that he was gone, she'd gotten back up. She was staggering, but what did they think about that? Drunk. In short, no one appears to have known she was stabbed except for there was the 2 men, Carl, and then another man that I'll talk about in a second.
But Carl didn't know it until after the
second stabbing. And so their calls were super confusing. It didn't seem like a fair situation. Police knew that bar was in the area. They probably got calls every night about some dust up, so they didn't respond. Sadly, it was established she would have lived had she gotten medical help after the first set of stab wounds. That was less severe. Those were survivable. And she also wouldn't have been raped.
Right.
So let's get back to Mosley. On March 19th, Mosley broke into someone's house to steal a television. This is about 6 days after. Steal a television set. A neighbor, Raoul Cleary, saw him coming out with the TV and walked up to him and asked what he was doing. Mosley said he was a removal worker, and so I'm taking that to mean like a mover. But another neighbor named Jack Brown came over too, and he knew the home's owners really well, and he said, "They're not moving." I don't know you. So Cleary called the police, and Brown, I couldn't find out how, but he disabled Mosley's car so he couldn't leave. So did he puncture a tire? I have no idea. They kept him there, though. Once in police custody, Mosley just straight up starts admitting to all this shit. He not only admitted to Kitty's murder, where he said, I went out at about 1 or 2 a.m. looking for a woman to kill because women were easier and didn't fight back.
Ugh.
His wife was an RN who was at work when he left. So he left. I don't know how old his 2 kids were, but they were just home alone in whatever New York neighborhood that was. But then he goes on and he admits that he recently raped and murdered 2 other women. Barbara Kralik, a 15-year-old who'd been stabbed and raped in July 1963, and Annie Mae Johnson, a 24-year-old woman who he shot, raped, and burned to death in February.
Oh, God.
He also said he'd committed a multitude of other rapes and at least 40 burglaries in the last week. He's just sitting there and he's like, yeah, I did this, and I did this, and oh, shit, I did this, and
Wow.
Like, just all they were questioning about was the burglary.
Yeah, why are you stealing this TV?
Police only charged him with Kitty's murder. Witnesses had reported a car similar to his at the crime scene that night because he'd parked here. When he came back, he parked in a different spot. So that provided another connection, more evidence. From the sound of it, they didn't press charges for the other 2 murders because another man had also confessed to killing Kralik, and he was later convicted for it, despite Mosley not only confessing, having intimate details of the crime, knowing even what weapon was used.
Mm-hmm. Oh.
But going on the stand as a witness for the defense for this dude. Still convicted him. The man who went to prison for that murder later said he spent days being violently interrogated by police. He was actually a teenager when it happened.
Oh, God.
Yep. But he was a known, like, gang affiliate, you know.
He was a troublemaker.
Gangs of New York. As far as Johnson's murder, when he confessed to this, he said he shot her multiple times, but at that point, the ME's report said she died from puncture wounds. This ME was for shit, by the way. But hey, we know how they had to be trained. Now we know from our little tour of the coroner's office, which we'll have to talk about next episode, that all you need in Colorado to be a coroner is a high school degree.
Is a pulse. And
to be a local resident. And to be, a U.S. resident, like a citizen. So much, much later, after this, police would exhume the body and a reinvestigation would turn up multiple bullets in her body. He knew something nobody else knew. He did it.
Oh, my God.
Mosley's murder trial started June 8th and ended June 11th. He was sentenced to death on June 15th, but a later appeal and the reversal of many death sentences in New York saw his sentence converted to life. But his story is not done. This guy, we don't know. In the textbooks, again, you only knew he committed that crime. You did not know he had committed other crimes.
Right.
March 18th, 1968. Mosley cut himself. Okay, it said he shoved a Spam tin up his rectum. So he would be transported to a hospital. They'd have to take him somewhere to do surgery. I was like, what were Spam tins shaped like then? Do we have Spam? Yeah.
It was...
Was it still the square?
It's a
the
rectangle.
I mean?
I believe so.
So I don't get it. But...
Well, neither one of us is prone to
shoving things
up our rectum.
Correct.
Canned goods up our rectum.
But he did it. And he had to go have surgery.
And perhaps it was a case of what's handy.
But I was like, then why did the prisoners have tins in their room?
Yeah, where did he get the Spam?
Did he just go into the kitchen and shove it? Like, I don't know. So many questions.
That I really don't want answers to.
After a minor surgery to take care of that, he was transported back to the prison, and on the way, he attacked the officer, stole his gun, and managed to flee.
Of course
he found a vacant home, and he remained there for 3 days doing just fine. But then, here's where it got really murky. But from the sound of it, a maid showed up to clean this vacant house, and he raped her, and she called the owners afterwards, and the Kulagas were the owners, and they came together, because they were like, what? Because whatever she was saying was probably frantic and confusing, and they were like, okay, so what I'm taking from this is somebody's in the house. So they go to the house, and of course he has a gun. So he ties up the husband, and he raped the wife, but he left them alive. Took their car, went until he, on the 22nd, broke into a house that was not vacant, and there was a woman and a daughter there. He held them hostage for a couple hours. There was a standoff and all of this, but he didn't rape them or harm them in any way, and he did ultimately let them go and surrender to police. His breakout earned him 2 more 15-year sentences for escape and kidnapping. Notice there was no rape charge, because 1968. I would just like... if anybody questions whether somebody would be a repeat offender, it took him 3 days to rape somebody after he got out of prison.
Yeah.
I just want everybody to think about that part. In September 1971, he was one of the participating prisoners in the infamous Attica riot. In 1977, he graduated from Niagara University with a degree in sociology. This sticks out to me. You know why? Because in the 70s, the Kitty Genovese story was already in the textbooks. Yep. So he would have taken a class that taught him about this crime that he did and the bystander effect. And I'm like, holy shit. That's funny as hell in its own weird, twisted way. In fact, an op-ed piece he wrote for the New York Times pretty much confirms that he read about his case. He ended it with, quote, "The crime was tragic, but it did serve society." Her case was also credited with helping with things like the adoption of the 911 system. And because the people calling in had to either know their direct phone number or call the operator and be transferred. And things like neighborhood watches started because of this crime. So again, that kind of goes against the bystander effect. People are like, okay, let's go out there and let's start actively policing to make this not happen. At a parole hearing in 1984, which sounded like the first time he came up for parole, he said he was a victim on the inside due to his notoriety making him a target. He said something, I should have written down he had this whole quote about, you know what, on the outside these crimes last a minute or two, but inside I'm living with it constantly. Like, you big pathetic baby. He also said at the parole hearing that he hadn't intended to kill Kitty, so it was just a mugging, not a murder. He said, quote, "People do kill people when they mug them sometimes." Let's just forget that you actually also raped her and that you came back, you fucker. Obviously, his parole was denied.
Repeated times.
It was just a mugging. He didn't mean to kill her. So his parole was denied, right? Because not only is he not admitting wrongdoing,
right,
he's totally calling himself a victim.
And practically a hero.
Right? It was crazy. He went out for parole 18 times through the years, with the final time he was denied parole occurring in November 2015. He died March 18th, 2016 in his 80s. I think he was 81. Not only infamous for the murder he committed, but for being one of the longest serving inmates in the New York State prison system.
Wow.
His case was too famous. He never was going to get parole, but also he was twisted and didn't think he'd done anything wrong till the end. I will say his op-ed, he was like, that man is dead. But he still ended it with that quote I gave. That, well, he had helped society, actually.
I think they should have left the spam can there.
Right? All right, well, it'll come out on its own or it won't there, bud.
Just think of it as a really big kidney stone.
I did have another question.
Oh, God.
So what I haven't mentioned in this is that mostly was a black man. And I was wondering if a white man had been walking out of that house with a TV, would the neighbors have questioned him?
Oh.
And if they hadn't, he would have never been caught for the rapes.
That's
because nobody gave a shit about rape.
Huh.
So it's a complete aside for me. There was nothing about that anywhere, but I was like, would he or wouldn't he have been caught? If a white man were walking up, I mean, the one person knew the neighbors. So maybe it still would have happened, but I just don't know. So there's another psychology question for people. In the end,
something else to ponder.
Yeah. Kitty's neighbors did let her down. Period. Nobody came out of that building. One of them yelled at him. One person out of however many. And there was even a man who saw the stabbing, knew it was a stabbing. He saw that she'd been stabbed that first time. He actually saw the whole thing. And he just went inside to his basement because there were actually very ritzy houses in that area. Well, it said like $60,000. So I don't know what that is in the 60s.
Back then, that would have been,
pretty good, right? And he went to his basement and took a nap. He didn't go help her. He didn't call the police. He didn't do anything. And his name was Joseph Fink. And I was like, is that why Fink has been used as a bad word? I don't know. But
I think it predates that.
Okay. They asked him why he didn't call or do anything, and he said, I don't know. That's it. I
wonder if what was he doing out at that hour?
Nobody asked him that.
Yeah. Was he drunk or high?
Nothing was published about that. Right. There's a lot of reasons.
Coming home from a tryst, he shouldn't have been.
And Wisey in the basement instead of, it could have been. So. Anyway.
What time of year was she?
March.
Okay.
So it would have been cold, I think, at night in New York City.
Yeah. So, what I was thinking was if it was the height of summer, okay, it's hot, so you go down to the basement because it's cooler, but that would not hold in March.
No. Mm-mm. So, whether the bystander effect is real or not is still up for debate. How does it impact mob violence, for example, where here's this, maybe a couple people do a thing and everybody follows it. That's action.
Yes.
That's not, they all join in. Lynch mobs.
Mm-hmm.
How does that impact it? What about 9/11? In the heart of basically New York City, in the most urban of urban areas. How many people came forward and helped during all that, even at risk to themselves, not even counting the firemen and police, fire persons and police persons who came out there to help. So there's still a lot to learn on the topic. And the problem is, if people aren't even talking about the fact that this is not what happened, that there weren't 38 people standing there watching a murder, there were a handful of people who saw pieces of it.
That's crazy.
And a lot of it goes back to misogyny.
Oh, yes.
And they do question, okay, how much of it was known in the building by a lot of the people that they're a lesbian couple. And a lot of people were totally fine with that. But how many people weren't fine with that? Did anybody look out there and go, no?
Yeah, did they
Well, she certainly asked for it because she doesn't like the D. I don't know. So there are a lot of questions that come into play here, basically.
There are.
I found an interview with her girlfriend years later, and I thought that it would be nice to leave it with the fact that her girlfriend did go on to get a master's degree and to be a successful professional woman. She didn't get married. In the last interview I found with her, she had been in a relationship for 3.5 years. So, I mean, just a positive thing for her. And she was still in this interview. It was fairly late on, but I don't want to try and guess at what the year was again. But, it was still something that very much bothered her. She was asleep. It was, one thing said it was their 1-year anniversary that night. Oh. And that the whole thing was that Kitty was going to come home and wake her up. And they were going to have their little celebration or whatever. Oh. And so, anyway, she went on and had a pretty good life, it sounds like.
Well, good.
Kitty's parents didn't acknowledge her at the funeral. So, yes, they did know.
Fuck them.
Mm-hmm. And she's tried to contact siblings and stuff like that just to touch base with them later. And nobody would ever return her call. In that particular article, they said that they reached out to the family and not one of Kitty's family would respond to them about it. So, yeah, fuck them. They had a loss, but they didn't have to compound Marianne's loss.
Yeah, you can... no.
They were Italian Catholic. So, I don't know. I'm sure some of that played into it. The Catholicism probably played into it. But she said, even though she never knew for sure that they knew before that, but she said her mom seemed to know and was always nice to her then. So it could have been one of those domineering, it's the 60s, no, you're not allowed to call her back from the husband. Who knows? Yeah. Because she did say she was always kind to me, and I felt like she knew. She was very sweet there were a couple interviews with her, and she didn't damn anybody,
Which is very big of her.
Yes.
That is very evolved of her. I'm not sure I would be the same way.
Oh, hell no. Sources: the Association for Psychological Science, Medium, The Nation, Biography, Crime Library, the New York Times Archive, the New Yorker, and Wikipedia.
My piece seems so silly now. I got the heels of Kitty Genovese. I'm like, that's what I'm here for.
I kind of enjoy just blasting apart these psychological things that
the real story
everybody knows and that are wrong.
Yes. Well, we all know that no, that's not how it happened. Okay. So anyways, this topic comes, when are we doing this one? This comes out March 15th. I'm like, when is Easter? It's not really Easter related, but it involves a bunny. Oh. So that's why I was like, hey, Easter's coming. This will be great.
I mean, it is coming.
This will be, that's true. Dun, 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 dun.
A month later or so.
I don't remember. It's because the date of Easter always changes. So yes. I'm like,
I don't know how anybody keeps track of that. How do they keep track of that without technology? I want to know.
I don't know. I want to say something, but it probably would have been really disrespectful. Rude. So I never say
Look
anything.
at your restraint.
Right?
Twice already, at least. Triangle of sadness.
People just don't even know how much restraint I have. Anyway, this topic came to me via Thing 2. So this is an urban legend that sprang into life in Fairfax, Virginia. I have been there.
I also may have been there.
My friend Frida used to live there. I didn't realize that used to all be farmland. And about when this happened was when it was being developed. I mean, now I don't think you could grow grass there.
The whole East Coast was farmland at some point.
No, that's probably
actually
true.
The whole everything was farmland.
Yes. Well, that is true. So this spread throughout the DC area because nothing can strike fear in your heart like a bunny. That's according to
true if you've seen Night of the Lepus.
Or Monty Python. Or if you're a vengeance demon named Anyanka on Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Remember, she had the whole thing about bunnies.
No, remember, I have not watched it obsessively as you.
That's true, but that's kind of one of the famous memes, is that Anya is afraid of bunnies. It's mentioned
I don't
in
know who the fuck Anya is, so does that help?
She mentions it in the musical episode.
Oh, okay.
I know you've at least seen that.
I have seen that one.
So,
I've seen them all, technically.
So, and we're bringing an old favorite with this story into the 20th century. Nikki was like, this is the worst fucking pun you've probably ever made.
Oh, God.
So Justin Timberlake brought sexy back, but the Bunny Man is bringing the hatchet back. And I'm not going to sing that. Not even if Shannon begs me to.
Away?
Well, they weren't as handy. They just didn't fall to hand as much as they did at the early 1900s.
Okay,
so
that's true.
Okay. So the legend of the Bunny Man purportedly dates back to the fall of 1970, practically the Dark Ages. I mean,
but not as much the Dark Ages as the 60s.
I mean, I'll sit here and do stuff. Well, in 1430, there was a werewolf outbreak in this tiny town in a country that no longer exists.
But now we've gone in the Wayback Machine to the 70s.
1970s. I feel like because of the stuff I usually do, I have to explain. This is the 1970s, not the 18 or...
This is the bell-bottom 70s.
Yes. On October 19th, an Air Force cadet named Robert Bennett and his fiancée were visiting relatives in Burke, Virginia, which is in Fairfax County. So on their way home from a football game, they parked at the edge of a field around midnight. They claimed they were conversating. I suspect canoodling.
Canoodling.
I'm like, really? You're parked on the edge of an empty field.
There were shenanigans happening.
There were. Whatever they were doing, they saw something moving outside the rear window of the car. So seconds later, the passenger side window was smashed. Something came in through the window. And there was a figure in white outside the window. So Bennett immediately, and for some reason, the car was running. They left the car running.
What month was it?
It was October.
It was cold. They had the heater on.
Well, it may or may not have been. But I didn't check I did not investigate.
If you're canoodling, you want some toasty.
Apparently.
Nobody.
Anyway, he throws the car into gear, turns around, and hauls ass out of there, as one does.
Yeah.
And the figure screamed, as they were driving off, that they were trespassing on private property, and he had their tag number.
Okay. That just sounds like an angry old man, not a bunny.
Well, as they were driving off, they discovered a hatchet on the floor of the car, which is what had been used to smash it, what had come in through the window.
He had to be really upset to waste a whole hatchet like that.
Right?
Right, because then it's out of your hands. Then there goes my hatchet.
Maybe he was nervous and his hand was sweaty and it slipped.
Slipped right out.
Here's the thing. Here's the bunny part. When they reported the incident to the police, Bennett described the attacker as wearing a white suit and bunny ears. His fiancée said, yes, he was in a white suit, but he wasn't wearing bunny ears, but rather a white capirote. I have no frickin' idea how to pronounce it. It's spelled Capirote. That is a Catholic headpiece, particularly Spanish, that sort of resembles a very tall, thin dunce cap. It is not. So my
it's
mind.
Not a KKK hat.
And that's where my mind went. I looked it up. It's not as flaccid and droopy as a KKK hoodie.
I like that. There's some justice. I'm calling it KKK hood
flaccid and droopy. Yeah. I did that on purpose.
So, like, but isn't that something the priests would wear?
It's not, it wasn't clear to me if it was priests or certain practitioners at certain times of the year, but it's very much taller.
Right, like I think I've seen one.
It's like a spire on their head.
Yeah.
And they often have something over their face as well.
Was the KKK hood based on this?
Not that I could find, because I did look.
I've never understood why it had a...
I don't know.
No,
I don't know.
Look at that.
They couldn't get anything else up, so they have a point on the top of their
look
head.
how it was the pickup truck of the day.
Yes. I'm like, where was I? So that said, they both said that they saw his face clearly, but because of the dark, they couldn't determine his race. I'm like...
They saw his face clearly, but they couldn't tell if he was, like, pale as fuck or...
Yeah, I was like, that makes no sense to me. You either saw his face clearly or you didn't.
Yeah.
So after examining the hatchet, and this is what I can't get, because there's pictures of this hatchet everywhere, the police returned it to Bennett. Here's the hatchet that was thrown through your car. We don't have any use for it.
Would you like a hatchet? Sure, why not? I have some wood to chop.
I have chickens. I could use chickens.
No, you just spin and break their neck. You don't need a hatchet.
Okay.
No, sorry. That's how my dad grew up having to do it.
And I know that it can be done that way, but some people did. That's why chicken with its head cut off is an expression.
Yeah.
On October 29th, which is just like 10 days later, a security guard at a construction site, the man's name was Paul Phillips, was patrolling a new construction area. He found a man in a gray, white, and brown bunny costume standing on the porch of an unfinished home. So he approaches the man and is kind of like, what the fuck, dude? And the man began chopping at a wooden post, part of the porch.
With a new hatchet?
With a hatchet. Or no, this was called an axe. So
it's longer handle.
He's chopping at the wooden post of the porch with an axe, saying, "You are trespassing. If you come any closer, I will chop your head off." Yeah. So
you know what? I'd probably be like that about trespassers, so I can't even say anything.
Needless to say, Phillips did report the incident to the police. He described the man in the bunny suit as being about 20 years old. Mm-hmm. About 5'8". So
he's not even old enough to be cantankerous.
So far I'm with you. Okay, if you can gauge age that closely, more power to you. Height, okay, I get it.
Did they tell his skin color?
He also said, I believe they thought Caucasian, but I don't have that written down. But they said he weighed about 175 pounds. Mm-hmm. So here's my question: have you ever seen a bunny costume? They're not form-fitting, especially back then. He wasn't wearing some elastic,
Yeah.
I used to belong to a mom's club that had a bunny costume. The inside of that thing was fucking right. But it was not, you could not look at the costume and say that the person inside it weighed X or Y.
So, yeah.
I mean, they could have been svelte or they could have been.
He could have had a skinny face.
Yes.
And then not the rest.
That just seemed oddly specific to me. But the police had to close the case due to lack of evidence. So shortly after the second incident, someone who worked for that construction company who built the house that had been assaulted received a phone call from someone identifying himself as the Axe Man. He complained that his property had been messed up with the dumping of construction debris, mostly like cleared branches and wood and brush and stuff like that. He said the situation could be made right if that man would meet him that night at a specific location. So the police set up a stakeout, but nobody ever showed up.
Okay.
In the weeks following the second incident, no fewer than 50 people called in to the police to report having seen the Bunny Man. One man claimed the Bunny Man ate his runaway cat. I'm like, if your cat ran away, how do you know what happened to it?
Yeah.
By 1973, reports were coming in from as far away as Maryland and the District of Columbia.
Which, I mean, for the record, isn't that far away.
No, it's not. But it's spread out in that, in that area. And by the 1980s, these alleged crimes included murder. So as you might or might not expect, the Bunny Man in some cases evolved into a kind of a boogeyman, a story that parents use to scare their children into behaving. Like, really? The Bunny Man?
I hope he hopped and screamed about trespassing while he murdered them.
The other recurring theme was that the Bunny Man attacked or harassed people parked in various lovers' lanes or makeout spots.
He was like a less severe Zodiac. Or Son of Sam being closer.
Yes. So fun aside, because people are people and a lot of them aren't very smart, there's something called the Colchester Overpass, which was built in 1906, which was a railroad overpass in vaguely the same area as the Bunny Man things were happening. None of the incidents took place on the overpass, under the overpass, near the underpass, but it wound up being known as the Bunny Man Bridge because it's nicely alliterative.
Ah, yeah.
But ghost hunters and the curious public started visiting the bridge, especially around Halloween. Beginning in 2003, the police had to step up patrols around the bridge on Halloween, turning away people who didn't have a legitimate reason to be in the area. In 2011, approximately 200 people were turned away from the area for a spot where nothing happened.
Great.
It just sounded fun. The Bunny Man Bridge. And of course, I don't know if you've seen this or not, there was a slasher film made out of the story released in 2011 called Bunny Man.
Maybe. Mayhap.
So what was interesting was, and I didn't quote all of it because it was just a lot. There have been some studies done on this. People who heard about this when they were a kid kind of went back and followed up. Mm-hmm. And one guy started working for an archive. So he, followed up on it. And they all, despite how big the legend got, that the Bunny Man was a killer, that he was rampantly attacking, makeout spots, it's really only these 3 incidences that have any basis in fact at all.
Clearly there were no specific names of murder victims that you came across. Exactly. Yeah, so it's the Mothman times 2.
And people did things like they put murder in, like murder and Fairfax, and searched records from, I think they started in 1973, from like 1973 to 75 or 1973 to 1980. And there is nothing. There's absolutely nothing that connects with this. Mm-hmm. And then somebody found some horrible, they weren't related. I'm like, why are they in this article? They found 3 incidences of really horrible murders of families, and in some cases, young children, that were in like the early 1900s. And I'm like, why is that in this article? It has nothing to do.
He was in his 20s
in 1973.
Yeah.
It's not him. So, so that was just a fun, and I was like, I'm just imagining some cranky, half-lit old, well, he's not even old.
20s really throws that for me, but if they couldn't tell what color, the color of his skin, how could they tell he was 20?
Yeah. So I'm thinking some cranky, half-in-the-bag man.
I hope people know if they come on my cabin property that I'm going to do this exact same thing, except I only have an axe, not a hatchet.
Do you have a bunny costume?
You're trespassing!
If I got you a bunny costume, would you stop long enough? We could hang it on a hook by your front door.
It's cold, so probably I would put the clean, new, not rancid furry suit on to go freak out. Because honestly, they're not going to come back on my property if I chase them with a bunny suit and an axe, are they?
I certainly wouldn't.
We have neighbors, but they're not actually going to build a house. It's a couple people own it together, and they just camp there, which is quite pleasant, actually. I'm like, okay. Because if you're up there alone, you can, hey, there's a little fire over there going, and they have their little thing. So I might just hop over there and freak them out for funsies.
Please, can you
put a skeleton in their outhouse?
Can you have your husband film it if you do? Or can I go and film it if you do? So that...
I have a pair of footies up there. I'll just wear that.
There you go. So that bunny costume. So my friend Gretchen and I belonged to this mom's club. And this woman she was in charge of the Easter party. And we started going, okay, what's the plan for the Easter party? She goes, don't worry about it. I got it under control. Okay, that's a pretty vague answer.
Yeah.
And that didn't sit well with either of us. So we drove to her house, to her home. It was not a house, but we drove to her home and said, we're here to collect the bunny suit because we need to make plans for the Easter party. And she argued with us. And my friend Gretchen, who you would love, just kept saying, okay, but we need the bunny suit now. And the woman would go off on another tangent. Okay, can you get us the bunny suit, please? So eventually we did get the bunny suit back, and I can't remember who we had played the Easter bunny that year.
Weird.
That was just, and I got thinking about it, and at some point I said, have we ever had that thing professionally cleaned? Mm-mm. No.
I figure the school mascots, they must just keep Lysol like bowling shoes and just Lysol the whole inside of it. Just get chemical burns on their skin after a while. Yeah. Because remember the first hit, I posted a picture of me with like a furry at Mile High Con or something. Everybody was like, oh my God, don't ever touch their suits. They're so dirty. But then one of my
Because that's what you were going to do.
Right. I just wanted to rub all over it, you guys. And one of my employees ended up, he was a furry, and he actually was on a whole show that they did a documentary about it and everything. And it was like, it's good to know, like, the one type of each person, you know, so that, because the things people said about furries in there, and I was like, have you even met one?
I would say most people...
They're an easy group to target and make fun of, basically.
Yes, and I would say probably a lot of people do know someone who's a furry, but they don't know that they know. Uh-huh. They don't know that that's what the person likes to do. Or a brony
or whatever.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Oh,
you should meet one of every person and see that they're just a normal person like you, but they have different things they're interested in. All right.
So...
Your sources.
Oh, my sources. I didn't have a whole ton, but Wikipedia, of course. Do I even have to say that one every week?
Yeah, you do.
Wikipedia and the Fairfax County Historical Site.
Nice.
And they have actually, if you were interested in looking at the evolution of an urban legend, some of these articles were really, they got into, and they were like, well, we can eliminate these because of X, Y, and Z. And there was one, then they were like, okay, we took this woman's story more seriously because she could cite a specific source. It wasn't, oh, I heard. She was like, I was watching the news and they announced something about a man dressed in a bunny outfit. Mm-hmm. So it was kind of interesting.
I'm trying to remember if I heard it because it sounds familiar. And I did live in Maryland for a time, but a lot of us in that area were transplants. So pretty transient around there.
So, yeah.
All right. Well, thank you all for listening.
Yes, thank you. And we will talk to you again next week.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening to Mysteries, Monsters, and Mayhem.
Find us on Facebook and Instagram or at our website, mysteriesmonstersmayhem.com.
Please like, rate, and review, follow, and share wherever your favorite podcasts are downloaded.
Thank you for listening and supporting our podcast. We'll be back next week with more shenanigans.